I have read many Naruto, Bleach crossovers, but there are few when he is a Quincy, so I decided to try and write my own. Naruto will probably be stronger than lots of the other characters. But I will try not to make him overly powerful. I just don't want to make him super weak, cause then the story would be boring. Just to warn you, I might not update this story very fast because I am very lazy, and at the moment I am working on two others. Like always, I will be very appreciative if you review, and I will try to answer all of you questions or make the story more to your liking. Just please don't ask me to make this a yaoi. Don't forget to review. Chapter 1. The Forest. It was a cold fall night in Konoha. Darkness had fallen early and the light of the moon cast dark shadows across the ground. The wind was biting, blowing red and gold leaves through the air. Freezing rain came down in sheets covering the roads with a slick covering of ice. Most of Konoha's citizens were inside their homes eating supper or listening to the rain hitting the roofs as they sat beside a warm fire. The unlucky few that had to leave the warmth of their houses ran quickly down the streets, not paying much attention to their surroundings, not that there was much visibility in that weather anyway. They were all much too occupied with getting to their destinations and returning home for the night that they didn't see a little 6-year-old boy with blonde hair running down the streets. His wet clothing sticking to him like a second skin as he tripped his way towards a large forest wearing shoes that were 2 sizes too large for him. Not that they would have cared much about the boy anyways. If they had seen him, they might have even given him a little slap for blocking the roads. Naruto ran down the streets as fast as his little 6-year-old legs could carry him. He had been running in the cold for at least 10 minutes before it had started to rain. At first it was just a light sprinkling of water, but it soon became more of a rainstorm. The rain was so cold that he was surprised that it hadn't begun to snow yet. Naruto started to think that his idea of running out of his apartment to train had not been such a good idea. It had been 2 days ago when he had heard the Hokage talking to a ninja with an animal mask on his face about a large forest. The Hokage had said that it would be the perfect place for the ninja to train and that he would become more skilled in no time. When Naruto had heard this, he immediately decided that he would sneak out and find that forest so he could become the strongest ninja in the whole village. So here he was, his orange jumpsuit drenched and bright blonde hair plastered to his forehead. His teeth had started to chatter a minute ago and he could feel the numbness threatening to take over his legs. His whole body was trembling as he went slowly down the streets, careful not to slip on the ice. Suddenly something came into view. It was a large forest surrounded with a large metal fence. This had to be the place. Forgetting all about how exhausted he was and how much ice was on the ground, Naruto ran towards the forest and entered through the first large gate he found. As he marched off into the forest, he realized that the large trees were shielding him from the rain. He had already started to warm up a bit and began humming a tune that he had heard one of the villagers singing before. This forest wasn't as scary as he had imagined it to be. He had thought that there would be giant beasts and monsters from his nightmares that he would have to defeat, but the forest was really quiet. All he could hear was the slight pitter-patter of the rain that made it past the branches of the huge trees hitting the plants close to the floor. It was strange, he thought, that there were no animals about, but he supposed that they must have been hiding from the rain as well. Making his way through a little dirt path that was overrun by weeds and brambles, he continued his way through the forest. The place was actually sort of calming. It had a nice feel to it that made Naruto feel at home. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind swirling through the trees to find him. It lifted his hair out of his face and he watched in awe as the leaves flew around looking like the dancers that Naruto had seen performing in the village streets before. Was this why he felt so at home in the forest? He couldn't explain how, but the wind seemed to be telling him the way to go. It was whispering comfortingly into his ears like a friend telling you a secret, and giving him gentle push in one direction. He decided that he would follow the path that the wind had set out for him. As Naruto followed the wind, he was unknowingly avoiding the dens of all the animals that were living in the forest. Most of the animals were sleeping in the forest right now and would only attack a human that clumsily landed on their homes. Only the wolves were out on that night, drawn out of their warm beds by the enticing light of the moon. They padded about quietly in search of some food to eat, their eyes seeming to glow as the light reflected off of them. Their long black claws and bone-white teeth gleaming in the pale light. They let out quiet yips and barks that could not be heard over the rushing of the wind. They moved silently through the trees like ghosts. Their hunt had begun. By the time Naruto had made his way to a little wooden shack between the trees, it had already grown dark. Even in the darkness he could see that it was run down and covered with moss and vines. Anyone coming through the forest would not give the little building a second glance, but right now Naruto was tired and needed a place to rest. Though the shack would not be Naruto's first choice of where to sleep, it was certainly enticing after all of the walking he had done. It was almost better than his apartment that was littered with empty ramen cups that had started to grow mold. He made his way inside and cleared the dirt and grime out a small patch where he could sleep. As he was doing this, his hand brushed against a cold object that felt like a metal chain. He would wait until tomorrow to find out what it looked like, but for now he slipped the chain of the necklace over his head and lied down. As he fell asleep, his dreams were filled with vivid images of men in white clothing that wielded glowing blue bows. Naruto woke up with a cold blanket of sweat covering him. His heart thumped wildly. He had been awoken from his peaceful slumber by the sound of growling. It was low and menacing and seemed to come from all directions. In his hiding place, Naruto began to sob. All he had wanted to do was grow stronger, but now he was going to be killed by some wild animal. He would never have the chance to become the Hokage, and the villagers would hate him forever. No, he would not let this happen. He would not simply fade from existence. He was going to become strong. He would be the Hokage. As Naruto thought this, the necklace that he had found began to glow an eerie blue, as if responding to Naruto's feelings. Out of instinct, he pulled the necklace off of his neck and placed it onto his right wrist. As it touched his arm, there was a great surge of energy, and Naruto found himself holding a glowing bow in his hand, just like the men in his dreams. Unknown to him, his highlighter blonde had hair turned jet black as his eyes became an even brighter shade of blue, if that was even possible. His eyes seemed to glow with the same energy as the bow, as if showing the immense energy that was building up in his soul. Stepping fearlessly out of the shack, Naruto was surrounded by 5 pairs of glowing eyes. These eyes belonged to the largest wolves that Naruto had ever seen. His resolve started to falter. How could he defeat these beasts? They were huge. At least 3 times his height, but he had no time to think about this as the first wolf lunged at him, pointed claws aiming for his neck. Out of reflex, Naruto pulled up his only weapon. He didn't know how to use it, but it seemed to come naturally as he created a glowing blue arrow in his hand and fired it with the bow. The arrow struck true, right through the wolf's heart as the beast collapsed to the ground. Had Naruto been out of danger right now, he would have probably broken down crying at having killed for the first time. The other 4 wolves were more leery of Naruto now. They looked at each other uncertainly before leaping at him all at the same time. Naruto knew he had been caught. He would not be getting out of this situation, yet he still wished with all of his heart that he was somewhere else. So with a blinding flash of blue light, Naruto disappeared from the ninja nations, leaving no sign that he had existed besides his old apartment and a small dirt-free space in an old shack in the forest of death. The wolves stared at the empty space where a child, that was to be their next meal, had just stood. Confused as to where their prey had gone, they sniffed around for a bit, but it was to no avail. Naruto was not in that world anymore. Chapter 2. Ryu was shocked. He had been walking towards the place where he and his grandfather usually trained when a boy about his age had appeared in a flash of blue light, forcing him to shield his eyes with his arm. The boy was wearing an orange and blue jumpsuit that was covered with dirt and leaves as if he had slept in the woods. Curious, he had slowly crept up on the boy who was now lying in the grass and stared at him. He examined how the boy's raven hair blowing gently in the wind as it brushed his shoulders, making his pale skin stand out. The boy's eyes fluttered open to reveal two bright blue gems that seemed as vast as the ocean. As Naruto woke up, he found himself staring into the eyes of a kid who looked to be the same age as him. The boy let out a squeak before jumping away from him. Naruto examined the frightened boy. He was wearing the same clothes that the men in his dreams had been wearing, and he seemed to be giving off a small aura of power, not unlike his own. Maybe this kid could explain to him what had happened back in the forest and tell him where he was, as this certainly wasn't Konoha. Naruto couldn't see any ninja running through the trees, and the houses looked completely different than any area of Konoha that he knew. Just where was he? As he continued to examine his surroundings, the other boy stared at him. After several minutes of this, Naruto became irritated. "What do you want?" he practically yelled at the other kid. Ryu jumped, clearly not expecting the other to yell as he had, before getting angry. "Why are you yelling at me?" His hands clenched, ready for a fight. "I'm not the one who fell out of the sky." Naruto paused at this. He thought back to his fight with the wolves. He had used some strange power that had taken the form of a glowing blue bow, and he had killed one of the wolves, but after that everything became fuzzy. The only thing he remembered was a large flash of blue light when he had thought he had been about to die. Maybe this was heaven and he had really died, but he realized that he wasn't in heaven when he noticed the splitting pain that was currently coming from his head. There wasn't any pain in heaven. The sky, huh? Well, why do you look like those weird men from my dreams with those strange blue bows? Naruto inquired curiously, ignoring how his head throbbed. He had to learn more about his whereabouts now. Ryu was shocked. From what the boy had said, it seemed that he was talking about the Quincy, but nobody was supposed to know about the existence of the Quincy. He had to get his grandfather, and fast. "Wait here," he called to the other boy over his shoulder before running off to find his grandfather. He found him sitting on a large rock in the middle of a large clearing where they had planned to spend the day training. Gasping for breath after having had to run so fast, he explained everything to his grandfather, causing the old man to frown. "Take me to see this kid," Soken said in a calm voice to his grandson. There was no use worrying about the child until he met him. He followed Ryu at a slightly faster pace than he usually walked at until they reached the boy. As Soken studied the boy, he was surprised. The child had a Quincy cross. Not only that, he looked almost the same as Ryu. Sure, his grandson had slightly darker eyes and wasn't wearing those peculiar clothes, but they were basically twins. He gaped at the two for a few more seconds before getting a hold of himself. There was no use getting worked up over this, he would just have to act calmly like always. Soken walked up to the boy slowly and sat down while smiling to make the boy more comfortable. "Would you mind telling me your name and how you got here?" he asked in his grandfatherly voice that he normally used on Ryu. Naruto's eyes widened. What should he do? He could lie and say that he didn't remember anything, but this man might be able to help him. He furrowed his brows, thinking deeply, and then he had an idea. If the wind had led him to Strange Cross Necklace, maybe it could help him now. So Naruto closed his eyes and listened to the wisps of wind that flowed around him, feeling more at peace than ever. Soken and Ryu were confused. Soken had just asked the boy a question and the boy proceeded to close his eyes and pretend that they didn't exist. Soken was about to ask the boy another question when he opened his electric blue eyes and spoke in quite a serious voice for someone his age. "My name is Akira. I was wandering around in a large forest near my home when I was spotted by a wolf. He paused to take a breath before continuing. While looking for a place to hide, I found a glove and a necklace. He held out his arm and picked up the necklace to show them. When the wolf attacked me, I somehow turned the glove into a bow and defeated it, but I can't remember anything else. There. It was just the basics and didn't tell anything about his village. If the two somehow earned his trust, he might tell them more, but for now he just gripped tightly to the small training kunai that he had tucked up one of his sleeves. Soken was amazed by the boy's announcement. From the boy's story he deducted that the boy had somehow became a Quincy after finding the cross. It should have been impossible, yet there the boy sat. Do you know where your parents are? They're dead, sir. I have lived by myself for a year now. Soken was shocked. No child should have to lose both his parents at such a young age, and they should defiantly not have to live alone after that. How would you like to come back with me to my house? 1 year later. A 7-year-old Akira Ishida sat with his grandfather and little brother. He had grown close to them over the past year as he grew stronger from the training he was given. Several months ago he had told both of them his real name and what had really happened. Soken had adopted him and allowed him to keep his made-up name if he liked, and Akira chose to do just that. He didn't want to remember his old life. It was over now and he would never return, that had been decided when he was adopted. He had a true family now, so he had no need for Konoha anymore. Well, he might have been overdoing it a bit. Surely if someone found a way to send him back he would like to say goodbye to the Hokage and the ramen man. As Akira and Aryu had started to grow they looked different, but still close enough to be brothers. Akira had been shocked about his hair and eyes at first, but the black had soon faded out, leaving his hair a slightly paler blonde than before. Both of the boys wore the white Quincy outfits that they loved so much. The only huge difference between the two was their hair. While Yuryu's black hair reached his neck, Akira had started to grow his hair out. Right now it hung just below his shoulders. Today Soken was teaching Akira and Aryu how to control their powers better. He had been in the middle of a lecture when out of nowhere 10 hollows appeared. Soken dodged and weaved through the attacks like an expert as he fired off as many arrows as he could. You could tell that he had once been a strong warrior, but the years had taken their toll on his body. As the fight dragged on, his knees began to weaken and his hands shook as they sent off yet another arrow. Aryu and Akira noticed this and tried to reach their grandfather, but it was too late. They watched as if in slow motion as their grandfather was killed by a huge hollow. Aryu collapsed to the ground in horror. His grandfather had been the only adult that had understood him. He had taken him in and trained him in the ways of the Quincy so Aryu would be able to defeat the hollows that attacked their home, but what good was that now? Seeing that the strongest of the humans had been killed, the remaining hollows attacked the two boys. Akira hated the feeling of not being able to save his grandfather, but he feared losing his new brother more. He would not let his brother die. With that determination he summoned his bow and an arrow with new strength. As he pulled out more and more power, the arrows he was using had turned purple, but it went unnoticed. When he shot it, the arrow went straight through the first hollow's mask, killing the foul beast with one blow. As Aryu saw his brother fighting for him, he realized that he would be a fool to let his brother die as he sat on the ground, so he got over his weaknesses and helped his brother defeat the hollows. As the last hollow died, the two kids sunk to the ground in exhaustion when suddenly a person appeared in front of them. He was dressed in a black Soul Reaper uniform, but he could not have been a Soul Reaper, for if he was, he would have helped the Quincy's, wouldn't he? Suddenly he stepped forward. He had long brown hair and blue eyes. He looked down at the two in disgust. Well, what do we have here? He said in a rude voice. Two little Quincy's who are unable to fight. He continued as he unsheathed his blade, preparing to kill the two. Akira and Ryu looked at him in horror as he approached them. That man had let their grandfather die and now he was going to kill them while they couldn't fight back. Surely this had to be a joke. Their grandfather had told them that Soul Reapers were good people. Sorry, but orders are orders. The man laughed and brought down his sword, not sounding sorry at all. Something snapped in Akira. His eyes turned red and his hair turned black once again. As he summoned all of his remaining power into one huge arrow, it began to glow red and the wind whipped around him, forcing his brother and the bastard Shinigami to close their eyes. When Akira shot the arrow, it struck true, lodging deep within the man's head. The Soul Reaper didn't even have the chance to realize that he was dead before he collapsed to the ground. As Akira saw the man lying dead, his anger went away and the wind calmed down. They were out of danger for now, but as their adrenaline left their bodies they realized what had happened. Akira had killed something that was not a hollow for the first time and their loving grandfather was dead. As Ryu looked over at his dead grandfather, he collapsed to the ground crying, finally able to release his emotions now that the battle was over. As Akira watched his brother on the ground, he felt sort of empty and his hands were shaking. That man would have killed his brother. He had had to stop him. So why was he feeling so damn sick? He shook those thoughts away and knelt down to comfort his crying brother. As he pulled Ryu into a hug, Akira knew that he could never let Ryu be killed. Not even at the cost of his own life. Those bastard Shinigami would never kill the boy that he now considered as his only family, his little brother. Nobody had noticed the curious color of Akira's bow because his brother's eyes were closed the whole time and the only Shinigami that was patrolling the area was the one that Akira had killed. Not even Akira had noticed, as he was too concentrated on saving the life of his new brother.